Okay, I'm here to tell you our next story in our big story about Exodus. So we heard about how Moses was raised by Pharaoh's daughter and how he killed a man and ran away to the desert. And 40 years later, God called him through a burning bush to come back and to confront Pharaoh and to save his people from slavery. And how God hardened Pharaoh's heart so that God could show his power and show how big and awesome and wonderful he is. And the plagues he sent on Egypt, and then he led them out of Egypt, and he led them to the edge of the Red Sea, and Pharaoh decided, hey, I want them back, and he sent his army out after them. And God parted the Red Sea so that they could cross and get away. And then Pharaoh's army was coming in after them, and God released the Red Sea and it drowned them and wiped out Pharaoh's army. So here they are, they're on the other side of the Red Sea, and that's where our story takes place today. On the other side of the Red Sea, and they stop and they have a party, of course, singing and dancing and praising God. There's a whole couple chapters of Moses praising God and Miriam, his sister, who was a leader in Israel with Moses and Aaron, her brothers, and them praising God. And then they start walking because they've got a journey. They're heading to the promised land, they think. We'll get to that one next time. But first, God had told Moses, when you get my people out of Egypt, bring them to Mount Sinai, which was an important location to God. Bring them to Mount Sinai to worship me. So that's where they're heading. They're heading to Mount Sinai. And it's going to take them a while because moving 2 million people takes a long time. I know sometimes just getting out the door with just me and a friend takes forever. Or maybe you getting out the door with you and your parents and your siblings takes a long time. Imagine getting 2 million people up and moving. Oh my goodness, that would take a long time. So they've got a journey to make. Now, there are 3 things that humans need. There's lots more other things that are really nice to have, but there's 3 things we need. And if we don't have them daily, or in one case, every minute, we die. Oxygen, which there's plenty of oxygen. It's in the air, so that wasn't really a concern for the Israelites. Food and water. Now, they're out in the wilderness, which is kind of deserty, and there's not tons of water, and they've got 2 million people to give water to. And food. They can only carry so much food with them. And they've got their animals, but then they have to stop and kill their animals, and then after a while they're going to run out. So they need food and they need water. And what happens when you're on a trip and you run out of something, or you're getting tired, you start to whine. And so they get to a place and they've stopped, and there was no water there. Well, there was a spring, there was water, but it was bitter. The Bible said it was bitter, which means it wasn't good for drinking. Drinking it would make you sick. It was bad water. And they're thirsty, they need water, or else they'll die. And so God says to Moses, take that tree, throw it in the water. Okay, kind of weird, but they take a tree and they throw it in the water. Now, we don't know of any trees that make bad water suddenly good, that purifies the water. So, must be a miracle, because they took the tree, they threw it in, and it said the water was sweet, which meant good to drink. He provided water for them. Then they start to run out of food, and they start to really whine this time. And, oh, why did God take us out of Egypt if we're just going to die in the wilderness? We had plenty of food back there. We should just go back to Egypt where we had plenty of food, because we're going to die out here in the wilderness without any food. And now imagine 2 million people whining about that. Oh gosh, that's a lot of whining. So God says, okay, I'm going to take care of you. And he does this really cool thing. It says that every morning there was dew on the ground, and as the dew would dry, it would leave this white stuff, and they would go out and they would collect it. And they would eat it, and it was called manna. And it said it tasted like honey wafers, like honey bread. And every day of the week, God would cover the ground with manna. And then it said once the sun got higher, it would kind of just disappear. It would evaporate, kind of like dew on the grass evaporates. And he also provided quail, which is a type of bird that they would eat. I have never eaten quail, but I hear it's tasty. and that was a common type of bird. So, kind of like having chicken dinner. And he would provide quail that would just be on the ground, and they would go out and they'd pick up the quail and they'd pick up the manna and they'd have food to eat. But God said, only gather what you need. Don't be greedy. Only take what you need for the day, for the one day, because you have to trust me. You have to trust that I'm going to take care of you. So they only gathered what they needed for the one day, and some people didn't. And they found out that if they snuck some more and hid some more away to eat the next day, that it would grow worms and would stink. And they would have to throw it out. It would go bad. It would only last for the one day. And then God had told them, that every seventh day they were supposed to rest. They were supposed to work for 6 days and rest for 7, because that's how God created the world. Worked for 6 days, rested for 7, and that's kind of our model that we're supposed to live by. And so he told them on the 6th day, take 2 portions of bread, take extra bread. And then on the 7th day, he wouldn't put any bread out because he wanted them to rest instead of going out and gathering their food. And so then they would have enough bread for the next day, for their Sabbath day, their rest day. And then on the next day, there would be bread again. And it said he did this for 40 years. God provided manna every day for them for 40 years until they got to the promised land. Why did it take them 40 years to get to the promised land? I'm going to tell you that next week. But then I've got one more cool miracle that I'm going to tell you about today. And that is one more thing with water. So they've got food, and they're traveling along their way to Mount Sinai, and they come to another location to camp, and there's no water there. So God says, Moses, take that staff that you used to part the Red Sea, and the staff that I turned into a snake. I want you to take that and go over to those rocks, and I want you to strike the rock. So hit the rock with the staff. And Moses did. He took the staff, he hit the rock, and water came out. It turned into a spring, and the Israelites were able to get the water that they needed. And that story is really important, and it's going to come into play later, in a later story. So remember that one, that when God told him to strike the rock and water would come out, he did. He trusted God. He did what God said, and God provided. And so here are the Israelites, they're traveling, and they're getting to see how God is providing for them. In Egypt, they got to see how God was fighting for them to free them. At the Red Sea, they got to see how God was protecting them. And now they're seeing that God is providing for them. And next week, we're going to learn how they forget all about that and make a really, really big mistake. So take care, you guys. I'll see you next week. Bye.